Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here on such a beautiful day. My name is Julia Ray Hoddenfield. I'm the manager of adult programs here at New Canaan Library. And I just want to thank you all for being here and to thank the Glass House for being such a tremendous partner for bringing top-tier talent to the New Canaan community for so much learning. And we have many more fun events to come, so make sure to keep an eye on our calendar of events. And I also want to make a note that tonight we have Hilary Lewis, Chief Curator of the Glass House, and sculptor Mark Mennin here to discuss his exhibition at the Glass House, which will be running until December 15th. So make sure you, if you haven't already, make sure you buy your tickets to go see the event, to see the show until December 15th. You're not going to want to miss it. And then we have another event about hip-hop architecture coming up on October 12th. So lots more to come. And before I leave the stage, please just silence your cell phones, please and thank you. And also make note of our auditorium exit here. And the program will be recorded. So check out our YouTube channel or the Glass House website in just a few weeks. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's get started.
Julia Ray, thank you so much. Fabulous. It is a thrill to be here with you. It's a very big thrill for me to be here with Mark Mennin, who is one of my truly favorite artists practicing today, an exquisite stone carver. Again, I am Hilary Lewis, the Chief Curator and Creative Director at the Glass House. I know some of my colleagues are here. Kirsten Rauch, our newly appointed and newly started Executive Director, has joined us this evening, so thank you for being here. And there are probably several others from the Glass House will be here. If you have any questions about the Glass House, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards. This is part of our series, Glass House Presents. We are thrilled to be able to partner with the New Canaan Library in this beautiful space. This has been going on for a number of years, but it's very exciting to be in the newly renovated library and to be in this wonderful environment. This is a continuation of the work that we've been doing with Mark Mennin since the beginning of our season. We installed the work to coincide with the opening of our season in April. As Julia Ray mentioned, our season runs until the middle of December. We start usually in the middle of April. It's obviously weather permitting. For those who have not yet been to visit us, we certainly encourage you to do so. Please visit theglasshouse.org. We do require reservations in advance, but it's not like the old days when you couldn't get a ticket. It's doable, so please consider coming to visit us. And even if you've been to see us before, we hope that you'd come back especially to see Mark's exquisite work. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to discussions with you, but can I just give a little bit more of an intro to you?
Please.
If you don't mind. Mark's work is exquisite, and he is an exquisite man in terms of the way he speaks about art and architecture. So I'm particularly happy to have you in conversation. Mark was educated at Princeton, studied history, but also did a little bit of work in studio art with Toshiko. You want to talk a little bit about that? Sure. And I'll leave you to discuss some of that. But Mark is a great example of someone who is scholarly beyond art, but this all informs the amazing work that he does with materials. We're going to talk a lot about materiality, a lot about form, a lot about and the knowledge of the history of art. Mark, do you continue to teach at the New York Academy of Art? I know you've been doing that for many years, but I don't know if that's still actively the case.
Apparently I'm still on the faculty.
Still on the faculty in New York.
Taught a class for a couple of years.
That's great. And Mark's studio is based in Bethlehem, Connecticut, in Litchfield County. You've been there for quite a number of years. Your studio's there, your home is there. You were born in Cedar Rapids, isn't it?
Cedar Falls.
Cedar Falls, excuse me, Cedar Falls. But Mark is a New Yorker, for the most part, not born, but very much raised and grew up in New York. So you are a local guy, but you're also very much Connecticut-based. So I'm thrilled that we could present the work from Connecticut. And for anybody who came in after I was making those initial remarks, there is a long-standing history between Mark Mennin and the Glass House because of the work that you were doing with Philip Johnson for an important project in Dallas, a fabulous church that would have included your sculpture. Unfortunately, like so many architecture projects, it was not completed before Johnson's passing. So with that, I want to launch into your work. I know we've got a lot of images to look at. Well, just one last thing. I'll promise I won't hog for any after that. We have 16 works on display currently at the Glass House, ranging in scale from small within Demonsta, very large scale within the property, and anyone who comes to see us for one of our standard tours will see this work. If you really want to spend some extra time, if you come on a Sunday when we have self-guided tours, you can really take your time, examine the work, and also spend as much time as you wish on our property. So with that, Mark, here we go.
Thank you so much, and so great to be here. I'll give a bunch of background before I get to the Glass House pieces themselves, and for anyone who does get there, try to sell some tickets now.
Yes, I'll send you. Thank you.
To have that kind of background might actually just help things out a little bit. So to start, I am a stone carver through and through now. I mean, I have been a welder and a figure modeler and everything else that would have been the proper training. But eventually, for the last 30 years, I guess, it's been exclusively stone. And it's really just because it's been the easiest thing to project an idea. I think really from the beginning, I'd gone to Carrara in the early 80s, and when you arrive at something through the process of elimination, because you see a lot of things that are being done or overdone, it's a positive way at arriving at an identity that's hopefully a changing approach to stone. And so that's always been the motive behind using an old material in a hopefully newer or fresher way. I'm showing the first slide. This was a early training coming to in handy in a midlife crisis. This is just a statue that I'd made in 2008 during the financial crisis. Kids needed shoes, and there was a commission that came up for Pomona College. But it was great to sort of, like swimming, reactivate your skills as a figure carver. And I remember just the love of detail and all the extremities that modernism, where I've ended up, usually eliminates unnecessary detail or decoration as a maxim. And so it was great to sort of re-energize the figure in the work, and also because, as you'll see in some other slides later, the figures in. It's still part of the process in the most minimal forms, and also it's sort of a testament to you should know all the rules before you start breaking them, and so this was
absolutely.
One of them. Scale was also an early love after the figure. The figure came about in that sort of cliche first trip to Italy. You think statuary is some kind of black magic to how do you transform a human into stone, or some mythological thing. It can't actually just be a bunch of hard labor. And I had a father who was a musician, but also hugely educated in art history. So I got the early propaganda about how this is man's greatest accomplishment in the usual places, Florence and Rome. So, but scale is what really fascinated me, and the endeavor of making projects that are really a journey. This is a cliff face in the south of France that I started in the early 90s, and would go there almost like on vacation with the family in the south of France. They would go off to the beach, and I would do what I like to do most. And over the years, this got completed. It was for an art dealer named Enrico Navarra, who had this sculpture park in the south of France that was really just about doing site-specific things and not kind of place an object in a landscape.
The work almost looks like it's completely natural, like that could just be found like that, despite the fact that you carved that. And a lot of Mark's work is so different than what he first showed you with that exquisitely done figurative work. It often has a raw quality that you just think this could have just extruded out of the landscape.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it's great to see the show at the Glass House now that some things have grown in, and it feels that much more than April 1st or whenever we.
Yes.
So the endeavor. I had a good friend who was the great-great-granddaughter of Gutzon Borglum, and in the early years as a snotty East Side artist, she told me her great-grandfather was Gutzon Borglum. I was like, this kind of, WPA-style figuration. But of course, then I read a book about it in the endeavor and the process and the use of charges to actually model stone, and how the big gesture is still in need of the same kind of finesse as the fine motor skills of carving a figure. And so kind of a newfound respect for him.
Yes. Plenty of seats in here, folks. Please make yourselves comfortable.
And so once you get to a certain scale, I sort of started feeling the necessity to try to make a public art that served the public. And the word interactivity started to become a phenomena in the 90s when I started working on a particular scale. And the first real consideration of that was making the fountain and entrances and a lot of little fixtures around the Chelsea Market in Manhattan, which was another whole journey of a different kind. Like carving the cliff was wonderful to be outside and be in the sun and be physical all day. This was much different. It was an interior. I was making a dust storm for everybody in the construction. And OSHA didn't get a glimpse of what we were doing inside.
No, never.
Unions. But, just the idea, I remember the most gratifying moment being just this little kid holding onto the railing and just like being fascinated with the fountain. And I thought that was much more gratifying than getting the good reviews I might have gotten.
Yeah.
Like
Mark, I
5
see that's
years
one of the
earlier.
beds that you have at the base. You want to talk about kind of your fascination with furniture, or is that coming up a little later?
Sure. Well, yeah, in fact, the Chelsea Market was kind of the first, need to have fixtures that had a purpose. But when they were going to have a purpose, they still couldn't lose their sculptural identity. And some people had successfully delved into that. Scott Burton, a wonderful designer, and of course Wendell Castle. But I did come of age, 70s and 80s, where function and furniture were kind of subordinate to fine art, and I always sort of had an attitude about that. Also, having become more fascinated with ceramics in the beginning, a lot of these craft media they were put in a ghetto, like glass works and fibers and clay and certain types of wood carving. And I always thought that was wrong. I think if something's beautiful, it's beautiful, and it can sneak into art history in any way it wants to.
You just mentioned ceramics. Do you want to talk a little bit about your relationship studying with Toshiko?
Oh, sure, yeah. Probably the most prominent member of the fine art department at Princeton was this wonderful ceramicist, Toshiko Takaezu. And I started working with her my junior year there, and then started getting really serious. I'd sort of planned to go to law school, but as soon as I went to a Stanley Kaplan course and they said this will be like another 2 courses in your curriculum, I remember whispering down the aisle, I don't think I'm going to go to law school. And it was a very liberating thing to then, go flat out, let's just finish school and become a ceramist with. But I worked for her a year after college as well and fired all her kilns and really enjoyed the relationship. She introduced me to Noguchi and a lot of other people who became important in the early years.
Thank you for adding that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So these are just other elements. And again, just collaborating with architecture, this was sort of my first, need to think of the architecture first and what I'm going to do to it, or the conversation that I'm going to have with the architecture. And also a Philip Johnson notion, the idea of the procession through a space mattering in either an aesthetic or a narrative sort of way.
Yes, and punctuated in many ways by artwork or elements of the architecture. Absolutely. And I also want to just point out the fact of just the materiality. Can you talk a little bit about the stone that we're looking at right now?
Sure, yeah. This was the last piece. We went from 10th Avenue to 9th Avenue. The developer was really like a general, like a military man. He was like conquering this area, and let's put something here and use this space. And we started at 10th Avenue with the entrance and made our way to 9th Avenue. And this last one, in this case, there was a little bit of a battle with the architect, even though we were mostly on the same page. But this was a piece at the 11th hour. The place was going to open the following Monday. We had to get this up, and it's mounted to a steel structure. And if you see that corner on the side, which is a nice little spontaneous painterly gesture, it's actually because the piece underneath it broke off the truck on the way down from the quarry and somewhere on Highway 87. And so I had an all-nighter of kind of figuring out how to make that grain complete the circle. And so
a happy accident, as they
happy
say.
Accident, yeah, right. Yeah. It's called Earth Birth because it's kind of the entrance of this whole marketplace that's harvesting pieces from the earth. And that's why the fountain that you just saw was the kind of mimicking a quarry. This is a piece. It's a little more manicured, but in the Stanford University Law School.
So you did make it to law school. That's good.
Yeah, well, that was the article in the San Francisco Examiner. Finally
Fabulous.
goes to law school at 50 or however old he was.
Beautiful work.
But it's dueling fountains, and it's kind of another leitmotif that's through the work is even the narrative having an inner conversation or dualities that kind of mimic or mock each other. In the same year that the kids needed shoes with that other statue, I went down to Newport to bid a job on just that long table in front of the statue. And I came out with the whole commission just because they had all these disparate materials in line for the statue, for the hardscape, for these other fixtures. And I forget what I said, but I pointed out how disparate materials would just be this chaos. They should do it in one material. Didn't necessarily mean myself, but the kids needed shoes, and walked out with a lot of angry contractors and like running to your car to get back to it.
But it worked out, and this allowed you to work on other things as well.
Yeah, no, very much. And actually, in front of that bubbler, there's a 60-foot rill, and this was a good dress rehearsal for the Stanford project, which was about 2010. This was like 2008.
I think I should just also point out there's an elemental quality to the work that you do. I mean, when you look at the materials, there's a timelessness to it because the material itself is timeless, but you have such an understanding of that materiality, of the color, of where things are quarried, and I think we'll be discussing that as we go forward. You use a lot of local quarries. In fact, you were at a quarry this morning in Connecticut.
Yeah,
Stony
Brantford,
Creek.
the Stony Creek has a wonderful history. This is some of it right now, actually.
There we go.
This is an amphitheater for a arts festival that happens up in Washington, Connecticut every year. And it was originally called the Five Senses Festival, so I'd made 5 large elements that echoed the senses. The stage is a big eyeball, but it has all these little inlays in it.
Yeah.
And the seating, and this was all done in a crazy hurry, but the seating I put in as blocks first and then carved over the next year to kind of conform to the figure and get comfortable and suggest a bunch of figures. And it was a festival that was generated by the Palabolis Modern Dance Company, which is, I was trying to have the same kind of flesh pile feeling in the seating as, so other disciplines. I mean, I think art about art can get very incestuous in narrative, so it's great to have had a broader perspective as a hack historian, or delving into other disciplines. This is a commission that's at Penn State University. It was a competition for a sundial. I had made a giant sundial before here in Greenwich, or there in Greenwich.
At the Bruce Park, right outside the Bruce Museum.
Yeah, that at the turn of the millennium. And that wasn't so accurate, but it was pretty. And this, we collaborated with the astrophysics department. In fact, there's a point of order in the interview process where my competition were 2 teams of sundialists. And I went in there very meek, and in the waiting room, I made some kind of joke like, hey, sundialist, how do you get a mortgage as a sundialist? And they weren't amused, and I thought, all right, I'm going to throw them under the bus in the interview. And I just to point out that, it's some kind of gizmo when it's a sundial is kind of emperor's clothes, and it's still just about a shadow and markers. And so I said, if I make it pretty, will you make it accurate to the astrophysicist on the panel? And he got involved and made,
Fabulous.
I think you can see those little inlays in the stone. If you know how to read it, you can read it within a minute of the actual time.
Fabulous.
This is yet another sundial, but a little bit different. It's another dual meaning. I mean, just like this one was supposed to be a gathering place as well as a timepiece. This one is in a different way. Once again, the procession down to the...
Where is this, Mark, by the way?
Oh, this is in a private collection
Private
in Washington.
collection.
And I forget what kind of orchard it is. But,
Beautiful.
And there's this whole nice walk down, and you walk on those lily pads into those shoes, stone shoes, and you become the orator to the people sitting on the digits, which are the seats around it. So there's all sorts of dual things. The name of this piece is Jack's Shoes because there's an character actor who lives in the town who does all sorts of oratory, communal things. So I always imagined him reciting something to
Like that.
people there. And there's a testament to parents thinking their kids walk on water.
Exactly.
But you
course.
walk on and off with the lily pads. But again, interactivity, some kind of function, but still holding on to a sculptural value, carves. And there's the kind of scale of the amphitheater. Next to the amphitheater, every amphitheater should have a cave next to it where
Of course.
lions might come out of, and you have
Exactly.
to battle. But this is a little wine tasting cave, but it was kind of fun to work with the idea. The entrance there this is the taste part of the five senses, so that's like a big giant tongue that you walk into. And I love those Renaissance gardens like Bomarzo and the Villa Lante that have these kind of follies. It's also in the pink granite, so it's a bit of a pink padded cell, not unlike one of the pieces we have at the Glass House.
Exactly. I should also note that you've spent a lot of time in Italy. I know you mentioned France, but you are a dual citizen. You are both
I am.
Italian and American, but you have spent a lot of time in the quarries in Italy, and so you have a real understanding of the architecture and history of Italy.
Yeah. It's kid in the candy shop stuff to go to these places.
Sure, yeah.
So the idea of inhabiting stone and having a use is equally important, and to think what it is scale-wise to be inhabiting inside on top of. Does the sculpture have an identity when a human being is in or on it, as well as just being empty? It has to hold its own as a sculpture, but really inhabitants might be what completes the picture.
What is this piece that we're looking at? I
So
love this.
This is a dollhouse I made for my daughter
Oh my God, I love it.
because I'm not very good with wood.
You know,
This is granite also. Yeah.
that's a permanent dollhouse.
Yeah.
Brad.
Well, the only
Monumental.
giveaway is the heart-shaped jacuzzi on the side.
Barbie, eat your heart out. Oh my God, that's
Well,
fantastic.
and this is where modernism comes in handy because a peaked roof is
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah.
engineering-wise. So,
I love it.
and for the right scale, you have our inhabiting. Yeah, I had to tell her not to try to kiss it. It's not going to become a prince.
No,
And
no. That's great.
And so what led to the idea of inhabiting the stone was still thinking like a figure carver, but with the idea of figural absence, starting to make shapes, mimicking processes or dialogues or conversations. There were smaller wall pieces that were a little more obvious, where one inhabits one's clothes as much as the clothes cloak around us or contain us, and then that kind of sets off all these older ideas of as a ceramist I made objects but also containers, and what does that mean sculpturally or in terms of the density of something. I mean, ceramics is all about hollowness in a way, or containing things. Stone is about density. All we see is the final skin or the outside layer. So I'd made a lot of these little wall pieces. They're called Little Inquisitors. So, and actually, the children were at that age. They were toddlers that just asking all these questions, and but also it's kind of like this idea of the Spanish Inquisition. I had a wonderful filmmaker friend, Milos Forman, who was making a film on Goya, and so the Spanish Inquisition played a big role. And he actually has a piece that has the mitered Inquisitor.
hat.
Yeah.
Nice. Yes, sir. How large are those pieces, Mark?
Yeah, they're smaller wall pieces, so they're probably 2-3 feet.
And by Mark's standards, that's a small piece.
Yeah, and also as containers or clothing, there's a hollowness that they are hollowed out to be vessels of some kind.
And those are all carved by hand.
Yes, yeah, very much.
Almost everything you're seeing is carved by hand, except in special cases.
Fashion way. But and then this is a series of emperor's clothes. So there are these. I think I used Franz Joseph of Austria's face because he had the mutton chops and the beard, and but you know he appears vaguely in the belly, and otherwise it's a torso that is empty and on the wall.
What's the material, Mark?
This is yellow travertine, marble from Turkey.
Beautiful.
That's it. And these are some of the first beds that were built for comfort, these ones. And you know, just discovering that the arc of these can contain a large person or even
They're surprisingly
an adult.
comfortable, by the way.
Yeah, actually, the first one that I finished, when the assistant took a nap on it, and he slept for 3 hours, and when he woke up, the sun was setting. He was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "No, this is what we want.
Proof.
This is a good testament to this." So
They look like they shouldn't be comfortable, but they're surprisingly so.
yeah, no, one size fits all.
One size fits all.
And,
Here's a happy little one. I love that.
so also in being a stone carver, the process might not be so green, but to be back in America, it's great that our most sourceable stone is granite. That's what's spec'd for outdoor projects because it does last forever. Marble gets eaten up by acid rain, so it can't last in the Northeast anyway for too long. And most of the granite that I've used has been the scraps of the quarry. Even some of the 20-ton pieces are offcuts that might have some sort of vein that an architect wouldn't want if they're designing something. It's a blemish.
So you're not basically quarrying things directly. You're using whatever quote unquote scraps are left over at the quarry.
Yeah.
So you're being sensitive to the way we remove material from the earth.
Yeah, and it's a great part of the journey to go to the quarry to find these things rather than, I need a block 10 feet by 5 by 2 and ship it down by Tuesday. So yes, this all falls in line with the utility. And as form, some things are more obvious than others. And again, the functionality to sneak that in there almost in a covert way is a nice way of giving the finger to my forebears that frowned on or looked down upon function or the idea of furniture. So even something like that is meant to contain people. This is a piece from our Branford Quarry here in Connecticut. It was exactly 100,000 pounds, almost to the decibel, when the crane finally weighed it and put it down. And
I thought the pieces we had at the glass house were heavy. We've got about 70,000 pounds of stone on display right now, but that's wild. And this is from your Manta series. Maybe you want to talk just a little bit about that form.
Yeah. No, it's something that kind of it held together a lot of different ideas. It represents a living form. There's a duality to it. This actually is called flight or float because it kind of has this airborne. Actually, what's real fun is when airplanes go by in the background, it looks like that's the contrail of this piece.
From this piece.
And I should have shown a long shot.
We have some small versions of this on display right now at the Glass House. Nothing as
there's
grand
a
as
few
this
models, working models in the Monsta. And what's real fun is the owner of the park where this is only mows wide pathways and leaves the grass and the wildflowers to go along, and the butterflies make everything move. But it looks like a runway that this thing just...
And this is in Washington, Connecticut? Or,
This is Washington. Okay. Oh, it's called Flight or Float. Oh, well, actually, it's a park called Cloudbreak, and it's very much the same format as the Glass House. It's in a residential area, so zoning's tricky, but it's possible to reserve a tour with it. And
is it already open to the public, Cloudbreak, or are they still?
Yeah, we had a soft opening.
You had a soft opening, so so people can find that online. Cloudbreak, is that one word?
Yeah, if you go to Cloudbreak, you can get in there.
In Washington, Connecticut.
And in fact, I'm taking trustees.
Yes,
of the
some of
Glass
our
House there.
folks from our Granger Society are going to be having a private tour of that with Mark in about a month's time.
Yeah, so I'll get through some of these. This is another piece in Washington Depot. There's a public green space. And originally they were thinking of a fountain, but in the Northeast that's very hard because a fountain is something less in the winter when you have to shut it off. But I still wanted to celebrate the river and the water and have a liquid form. And
the stone here, Mark, is?
This is Virginia Mist. So you probably would recognize it, unpolished. It's the facade of a lot of buildings in New York. The Breuer Whitney, or ex-Whitney, is
it looks
all
so
clad
blue
in that.
here. It's beautiful.
No, I'm glad you asked. It's 5, but I'm very proud of the joinery. And a little trick that happened, this is the first piece, was if you just interrupt a joint a little bit and put an inlay in, it really kind of unifies all the 4 pieces.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I love this stone. When you, this is the first stone that I went. I'd used that green stone in the Chelsea market. I literally felt married to it. And when you go to another core, you start feeling an infidelity.
This is also green granite, like what we have on site.
This is Virginia Mist also.
It's also Virginia Mist.
And a series of softening up. Again, inhabiting in scale. This is a series called Jonah that interacts with people. These are pieces that were up at the Decorative Museum and trying to project the idea of walking inside a block, but these are hollow pieces put together. But once again, the joinery really mattered to make them feel like blocks.
And for some people, if you haven't been to the Decorative, it's a wonderful sculpture park. Is it Lincoln, Mass?
Yep, Lincoln, Mass.
Lincoln, Mass. So it's outside of Boston. Beautiful.
As you get older, you develop these a little code of ethics, and I still sort of believe while I can to participate soup to nuts. And in the case of making models, I remember the last plaster model that I made, realizing like I could have carved this in stone a lot faster. So I started making the models in stone, and a lot of those are in the Monsta.
We've got some of the smaller pieces which act as models, for example, for this fountain. We have that on display in our De Monsta, which is that building that you first see when you come onto the Glass House property that's red and black. And so there's a number of precious small pieces that almost look like they belong in your daughter's dollhouse.
Well, in fact, I mean, you saw the little furnitures there.
Sweet.
And this is actually the only model I really had to follow to scale because it was in pieces as the fountain was. Oh yeah, I'd made it 1 inch to 1 foot, and until an architect friend said like, nobody does that. You use a slide rule and whatever that triangular thing is.
Yes.
But yeah, so that was based on trying to make a larger water drop and using the polish for a reason. And I kept using this idea. This is a Veterans Plaza at Penn State.
Penn State.
And collaborating with the same architect that I did the Stanford pieces with.
You do a lot of collaborations with architects. So we talked about Philip Johnson, but you have a whole host of folks that you have collaborated with.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, the better they are, the smaller their ego is in terms of like letting a sculptor put a blemish in their pure master plan. And this actually was a competition. I think there's Alfred Vignoli, who does these magnificent presentations where he'll draw on a newsprint pad what he's going to build, and he's such a great
You're
draftsman.
about Raphael Vignoli?
Yeah, yeah.
Who sadly passed away in the past year,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
nonetheless, I'm sure it's an exquisite building, but someone who would appreciate art.
Yeah, yeah, no, but he just was, he'd do these great demonstrations drawing on newsprint. But since half the jury was military and the other half were the art people of Penn State, they didn't quite get it. So he was coming out as we were going in, and I remember there was some Marine who looked like young enough to be my son, but also he could maybe break me in two. And I remember going in and saying, I hope you guys got more than a bunch of effing scribbles. And I was like, well, yeah, I got a stone model for this. And that kind of helped us along.
Oh my goodness.
That whole saga was a
It helps when you have
interesting thing.
Real.
This is an early drone shot, which was me climbing up this tree to get a little topographical thing, because we were really...
I should point out how physical you are. When we installed the works on site at the Glass House, I mean, my heart was in my mouth. I was terrified because you had like 10,000-pound pieces being placed using a forklift. This is who's operating the forklift, and then jumping out of the truck, then to place it appropriately, and then standing on top of pieces of stone. So you are quite an athlete, I must say.
It's because I'm not a good organizer, so we have to do it.
It's quite something to behold.
Just another, there's the contrails of the landing piece.
Yeah.
I guess I inserted that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. We've got actually two of your mantas, a small one in De Monsta, and then we have a slightly larger one that's in the window of the sculpture gallery. We've got two pieces by Mark Mennin in our sculpture gallery currently.
Here's another, so years later, the experience on the cliff in the south of France helped me compose this piece it's essentially a retaining wall for this, because the earth took a quick drop, and it was great to sort of quarry all these scraps and put them together and join them and have this sort of logic. And the piece to the right is actually a different photo, but it's about where it might be. And there's the function of sitting, but also being inside the stone. There's an echo that happens when you have a conversation.
So there's all the senses are being activated in the sense of that there's sound as well as touch.
Yeah,
and visual.
Or everything sort of having more than one function. I mean, just to sit or lie on it.
Look at all those cores.
Look at all those cores. You know where those are.
I do know where those are, but tell everybody else.
This is at the Boca Raton Museum. These cores bored out of the mountain with a giant hollow drill. And I remember, early on, the fascination is that they represent a hole somewhere else or a displacement. And that, I know it's a simple idea, but I'm still fascinated by it, because that's what quarrying stone is. When you make a building in New York from a quarry in Minnesota, it's this big geological displacement. Yes. And this is sort of a simpler micro version.
Can you just explain a little bit more so everyone understands why are those cores drilled as they are as part of the process in the quarry, so people understand why you're using this material in this form?
Yeah, they actually don't do it anymore, but the idea before is to drill a hole right into the bedrock, plant a metal tower that's going to be the derrick, the crane tower, and then they fill that with cement. So that really resists high stress on the metal. Like it's not gonna come out of the base. If it's gonna break, it's gonna be stress on the metal.
Right.
Instead of
and that's used as part of the process for quarrying more stone. Is that correct?
Yeah. And running wire saws that pull.
So basically, you're using the material that would normally be just thrown away.
Oh yeah. What they wanted was the hole. This was what came out of it, and
you turned them into sculptures.
Yeah, I mean originally actually I'm going to show some larger.
And to just mention that those pieces in Boca Raton were selected personally by the director of the museum, who fell absolutely in love with your work and was passionate about placing that permanently in the courtyard of the museum.
Yeah, that was a really fun project. Actually, I set those stones too, and I did realize, like, when you're in a landscape, driving the forklift around, there has no liability at all. Mm-hmm. But when you're this close to the pillar that's holding up a fancy building, it's very stressful.
Yes.
But here's somebody sitting in a hole, and so there becomes all this little metaphysical background to the whole narrative. These were from some columns that I recuperated from. It was a mansion in Newport that was across from that Renaissance garden that I showed earlier.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't know what I wanted to do with them for a while, but I knew I wanted to do something with
You
them.
upholstered them.
What's that?
You upholstered them,
I
apparently.
did upholster them. Well,
So
and
to
also,
speak.
there's a lot of, as serious as these might look, there's a lot of art historical riffs. In this case, it's you have to crack the hard classical shell to get to the soft, gooey Baroque inside. And that's why there's kind of a little
Fabulous.
drippy thing.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, this is a piece that ended up in Big Sur, but that's out of the same onyx.
And it's very similar to the piece that we have currently installed outside of our sculpture gallery.
Yeah, little nod to Mies with the
Looks just like the
cylindrical bed.
furniture we have in the glass house.
Yeah, well, it's inspired everybody. This is fun, though. We were talking to somebody about roughbacks being the most interesting thing you can take out of the green quarry because it has a lot of iron in it. It oxidizes, and then as soon as you penetrate it a centimeter or two, you get the green back. And so the green and the rust are just this wonderful color. That's an onyx from Macedonia. So that's a place I still go far to bring it. It's not the greenest process, but I love
You go to the
stone.
quarry in Macedonia, and we
do.
have, I believe it's 3 pieces of that. It's Macedonian honey onyx.
Yes.
That's currently on our property. Yep. Beautiful.
Yeah. And a lot of it's very translucent. I'll actually get to that.
It reflects light beautifully. Delicate.
I know I have to get through some of these. This is just the idea that, putting things together in a conversation. And we jokingly said this might be a shrink's office, but a listener.
That's something also we have at the Glass House that you have created in terms of the placement of your work there. Some of those pieces are very much in dialogue with other work. For example, our Donald Judd, you have 2 pieces that look as though they're very
Yeah.
much in conversation with that main
Yeah, no, in
piece.
fact. And that putting things in multiple and almost creating an outdoor living room is what the mission, having an indoor-outdoor possibility, and other dualities. This is, the death
You know
of
something
Marat.
about art history, don't you?
A little something.
Yeah, I think so.
But this is the death of Marat by David, and the bathtub becomes the sarcophagus, and so this is a much earlier piece, but kind of that sort of, without Marat in there, one can still sort of imagine the narrative, and so the figural absence end of things.
You're very much known for a lot of your work features that figural absence. It's not that you can't create purely figurative works, you certainly can, but many of, again, the pieces that we have on site currently are exactly that, where you can sense the human body can be placed on the work, or within the work, but the human form is not there.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
the human form that could be placed.
And then that negative makes for a comfortable
Yeah.
human form to complete the
Yeah.
picture. And, so a big goal always, stone is this forbidding material, and the idea of trying to push what its possibilities would be. And I'm certainly not the first person to use onyx as a translucent lit up thing. Designers make sconces, but to carve it and kind of use the properties of the stone or the properties of a carved piece, what extra drama we can create with that is interesting. So did a lot of experimenting with light, first with these figurative pieces. This is actually a small model for a Humpty Dumpty piece that's in the exhibition.
It's also
Coming up.
again, at the Glass House.
But
Wow.
it worked better with more minimal things, so I would use the pillow idea to light up. This is in Los Angeles, so downtown Los Angeles is in the background. And then I thought also when a figure is backlit, it's a nice little riff on what figural portraiture might be with the patron on
Nice.
top of the pillow. And
I love
also,
that.
it still has to have an identity without being lit up. And also, it can't be an obvious gimmick, but it is a wonderful way of emphasizing the geology inside the stone in a subtle sort
And I know
of
that's something that you pay a lot of attention to, the veining of the stone and the history, the fact that all of the stone kind of places its history in front of the viewer, because
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
seeing layer upon layer.
And that larger geological history, which
Exactly.
and also what's fun too is geology and biology kind of mimic each other. So with the figural absence, there's still this kind of network of veins that kind of mimic
Almost like a living force. Oh,
our vascular system.
I think we've seen this one before.
So
this is
yeah,
at the
this
Glass
is
House.
one of the pieces in the show, and interacting. I'll show some of the pieces from the show
Sure.
if we still have time. But it's everything. Hopefully, successfully has a conversation with the architecture, or the landscape, or a fixture in that sculptural fixture. And in this case, I had these two heads looking at the Donald Judd, who couldn't be less figurative. And I'm a Donald Judd fan, but I thought it'd be fun to put two heads looking at it, sort of like, what's that?
And this is called Oz.
This is Oz,
Yep,
and the other piece was Humpty Dumpty.
Humpty Dumpty, yeah. And
And
this
I
was
always-
part of your Fallen Dictators series, as I recall.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Both of those. Humpty Dumpty's main talent was making words mean whatever he wants them to, and I thought
very
that was
pushy.
kind of a very contemporary narrative.
Yes, I like that.
These are a series of wallflowers, I called them, where it wasn't, you remember these, where, it's a great, doing the ruff, the medieval or the Elizabethan ruff is a great way to sort of flex the fine motor skills, but also a setup for another duality. I'd made a lot of these baby heads that look either like elderly people or babies, depending on what you do to each detail or feature. Then, of course, it could just be a portrait of Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
But it's also the bud of these wallflowers, and might pose the question, is this a bud that's coming out of the petals, or is it being consumed by that kind of snaky stem
I'm
underneath
blown away by these roughs. The idea of carving that is beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's definitely, you need a very simple mind to get through the carving
you
of this.
You need very fine
Or patience, that they call it, yeah.
dexterity. How many pieces of stone?
Each one is 3. So there's the head, and then the ruff, and
the
then
base.
the green granite stem. And so a big inspiration, this is not mine, but this is, the pillows are by Bernini. It was the first sort of carving task he had before they realized the guy can carve a figure too.
Yeah.
So it's an antiquity it's a hermaphrodite. And so he was just carving the base. And I always sort of love that, how the base is always in contemporary sculpture dialogue, does a piece merit a base? Does a base merit being under the piece? As one too much noise? But I'm a big fan of the pillows. I'm a big fan of the figure. I think the
Yeah.
figure, this is in the Louvre, but it's great to watch, like, young American college boy tourists comment on her posterior and then walk around the front and be, oh,
It's hermaphrodite. Right.
surprise.
Yeah, fabulous. What I think is also so interesting is that obviously you would go on to do a great deal with that type of kind of pillow form.
Yeah, and making, not being true to like what a pillow would do, but more, they become more.
Absolutely. Hey, just one other thing about Bernini, though, which is interesting, is that Bernini, of course, was a great architect as well as a sculptor. And back in the day of his day, in the 17th century, it was just considered being an artist. So that one worked in all these different media, as did Michelangelo.
Oh yeah, there's no difference. Yeah, the Laurentian Library. Steps.
Absolutely.
Best staircase ever.
Oh, it's a great staircase, absolutely. But look at that fabulous
Yeah, these
pillow
are things
bench.
that and putting a lot of these outside made me start considering, not just the landscape, but what happens with the weather. So this, I with the rivers, I was considering stone rendering liquid, or with the pillows, the certain softness, and then taking another step to render vapors or clouds.
Vapors and
And so it's little chaise. These are just
Love
other
it.
things. The columns, this is a recent show at the Frederick Myers Gardens in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Wonderful sculpture park. I think it's the most attended sculpture park in the world because the people that live there are constantly going there weekly.
Revisit.
Yeah, it's,
That's wonderful.
so in terms of the clicker, it's the most traveled
Sure.
one. But this is in the atrium. It's a wonderful building by Todd Williams and Billy Cian. And am I saying that right?
Yep, Billy
Cian.
Chan. Yep.
And the columns were recuperated from a building in New York that was torn down in the 30s, stone that was quarried in the 1820s for a building at Lafayette Place that was thanking the Lafayette for his service. And it's a marble that's quarried in White Plains, New York. So
Beautiful.
I'd already carved a head out of it, but then I thought I'll test the tensile strength of it by trying that collar idea again. So,
and those roughs are absolutely amazing, plus another pillowed bench.
yeah. So I haven't figured out whether these are symbols of aristocracy on the top and democracy on the bottom, or just a bunch of headless monarchs.
Could be open to interpretation.
And the other piece in the foreground here is white Vermont marble and has one of those little comfy body cavities. That's the early Humpty Dumpty
We've got the larger version of
prototype.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
beautiful.
I'm going to try to get through this.
Where is this? This is
This is in Washington, Connecticut.
still,
It's sort
what a
of the
beautiful setting.
outdoor living room situation.
Yep.
And again, creating something that's going to be a dialogue or a conversation. That's just a close-up of one of the Boca Raton Museum pieces and the original cores. So the first pieces were not, I had fascinated myself on the idea of a hole in the hole. So these are little iterations of Etruscan architecture that.
They're so beautiful, Mark, because they feel like there's a softness to them, and they are anything but. I mean, what are we looking at right now? This is granite?
Yeah, this is that green granite from near Lake Placid, from Osable Forks.
Osable Forks.
Same stuff as the Chelsea Market. And
Beautiful.
another one of the columns. I just showed this pictures because you get the gooey ooze.
I love the
of the
idea of
Baroque.
like the gooey Baroque inside the classical. I hadn't thought about it quite in those terms before, but I love it.
That was a gooey epoch in art history, wasn't it? I love this one because it sort of had that teacup ride at the amusement park feel. But again, always trying, if you're creating little dualities of the narrative, they should be subtle things, not knee you in the groin statements. And so for a while, with furniture and function having been looked down upon earlier, and if these new, more abstract designs were ever questioned that they were anything but sculpture, I thought, well, I'll get a little more literal and make these miniatures that are clearly the shape of furniture, and then say, okay, so if you can't use it, does that make it art?
Unquestionably.
And to come full circle and say that anything can be if it's
And we've got a couple of these also in the
well made.
exhibition.
Yeah, the gesture and the carving of those smaller model pieces is the same sort of skill set that it would take to make figurative.
Mark, just curious, with some of these smaller pieces, how long does it take to carve something like this?
You know,
Hard
my
question to
My
answer.
answer is supposed to be 40 years.
40 years,
But,
exactly. It's been
no,
going.
but the reason I can't is I work on a lot of things at once.
Yeah.
And
You
put
return
that-
to things. For example, the largest piece that we have on site, you had worked on that originally 20 years ago, kept it on site at your own property, and then reworked it for us. So
Yeah.
I know that this is something you often revisit work and continue to carve, continue to affect the surfaces, and do. So it's almost like a painter who returns to a painting and says, "I want to touch it up, make a little change here and there."
That little and you know it's a good way to put the ADD to work. Having a lot of things going at once. So, architecture and landscape. I'm getting to the show now a little bit,
that's
but
all right.
this really was a great opportunity to have a conversation with architecture, the landscape, or any other object or fixture like the outcropping. In this case, the Monster, which I saw 23 years ago.
It was a fairly new building when you saw it. In 2000, it was 5 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if the interior was done yet, but and this is a piece called Mamba because it's got this kind of snaky back, but built for comfort.
And you can sit on it.
And
You allow us to have the visitors sit on some of it, not
yeah,
all
no,
the
absolutely.
pieces.
They're all very anti-museum statements, like
Yeah.
please touch, lie down on.
Not the onyx. We don't touch the onyx, but the
yeah,
marble
no.
and the granite. We allow
Grease
you
it
to
up. It's okay.
interact.
And this is interacting in scale with the library piece. And what's fun about this, I don't know if you can see it in this slide, but this marble, it was a block that Stoneyard said, "Come take this stuff away, or they were going out of business. We're gonna pulverize it and flatten the place." And it's this marble that just looks artificial. It looks like when you open up a Harvard Classic, that fake marbly paper on the side. And so this is a wonderful nod to making something as real as a stone, poking fun at artifice.
Absolutely. And what's the name of the piece?
Inside cover.
There you
yeah,
go.
That's right. Thanks. Put
Mark
me on the
has-
spot there for a second.
In case you didn't notice, Mark has a sense of humor. Thank goodness. And also, I just would also underscore the fact that all these works were placed in coordination with Mark. So you very much were co-curator, really guiding how we would place things, and really it's your interpretation of the site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's Oz again, without the light. I wish I should have had a photo of the giant piece.
We want everyone to come to the site and see it for themselves.
And this piece, it's called Long Pillow. We kind of jokingly call it Henry Wadsworth Long Pillow. But it's I set it up sort of more in relation to the pool than the glass house, because you can't compete with a glass house at the glass house. But the geometries sort of seem really compatible. And the idea of this piece, because of the veining in the stone, it was sort of rendering the idea of a cloud solid, once again, the vapor. And if the base is anything, it's like the terra firma for a sculpture. And then these are like the fascinations. This is what goes on when you're alone too much in the daytime. But
in your studio.
The joint becomes the horizon.
It's a beautiful piece, and I have to tell you, among our staff, I think it's the single most popular piece. If anybody could actually pick it up and take it home, of course it weighs too much, this would be it. Everybody's in love with this piece.
Yeah, my motto is always, if you can steal my work, yeah, you can have it. It's a good.
Yeah, you're really strong.
So, and this is called, what is this called? Oh, Selva. It's but I put it down by the outcropping of stones, and it's that green granite, and it really is something that got finished on site for the sake of this, and a lot of it's shaped with a torch. And a lot of the
markings
texturing.
that you see on the side, Mark literally painted with a torch once the work was installed on site. And just to talk again about the name of it, it's Selva, as in kind of the sylvan wood, to be kind of in a dark place, kind of mysterious in the forest. And this is placed down from the glass house in its own kind of special little district on
Yeah,
on
a
the
little
site.
nod to Dante too.
Little nod to Dante. There we go.
Here is some other. This is a piece that's being kept by the Frederick Myers Gardens, but sort of, I thought, little pillow on top of the larger piece. It's like when you see a bird catching a ride on a rhinoceros, the little parasitic thing. Here's the plaza at the gardens.
I love that.
Recent installation. And it just also showing how textures are like working a palette. If it's not polished or a split from the quarry, it's like squeezing some zinc white into the mixture.
And it's interesting when you come and look at the works and you see how Mark has worked the surfaces. In some cases, things are polished. In some cases, they're raw. Some cases, you actually have kind of roughed up the surface, and the colors will read differently as well, which is quite interesting.
So, and then this
love
is
that.
the last series. This is a piece out in Chappaquiddick. It was sort of great to place this there and those other pieces in Big Sur. I thought, now I've conquered America.
Yeah, there
Too good.
you've all the way from the east to the west.
I need some more Midwest pieces, I think. But this sort of celebrates bodies of water, and it follows the coastline in perspective. And an interesting phenomena happens. It's probably the last slide.
Yep,
this is a piece that's getting installed right now on the Schuylkill River on Kelly Drive in Philly, and I think it's 40 feet in length. But celebrating the Schuylkill River as an environmental triumph because it used to be flammable, and they've done a great job of cleaning it up. There's the piece in Washington, but just with...
How long is that piece, Mark?
That's about 45 feet.
45 feet. And again, how many pieces did you say that was? 5 pieces?
5 of them,
Five
yeah.
pieces. Wow.
But
just monumental. There is a true monumentality to your work that is coupled with this, I'm sure you all noticed, a marvelous sense of lightness and delight and humor mixed with a very deep knowledge of history, which again puts you perfectly paired with Johnson, who had all those qualities as well. So it's magnificent to see the work as it's evolving, because your work has evolved so much over the decades.
oh yeah, it was an honor to be paired with.
Oh, there you go.
And this is on a lake, but the same idea.
Yep.
And it's great because it's a very windy lake, and a lot of oarsmen row by, and it's kind of funny to see the piece interacting with the rowers. It's actually nice. I'm looking forward to the Schuylkill piece. This is right above where all the university boathouses are.
When will it be fully installed?
Thursday.
Oh, okay. Thank you for being here. My
But
God.
then it'll be landscaped, and
Wow.
so right here the grade's going to come up
Yeah.
an awful lot, so it's
Yes.
just kind of floating there. And then finally, this is the Chappaquiddick piece, and it does
Beautiful.
follow the coastline in perspective. And the result of that, like that other cloud piece, is the moisture will come in from the bay, and it'll stop at the coastline, and it'll often mimic my piece. Like, don't you have an original idea? But it's kind of a nice little echo. And the patron called me up after he took this picture and said, "You're a genius. Did you mean this?" And I was so tempted to say, like, yeah, that's the point.
Of course.
But in fact, I have to say, I will mean it from now on.
There you go.
because
That's
it's,
perfect.
Continual learning.
Well, it's part of that ongoing interaction with nature. So I think it's absolutely magnificent. I think that you probably will, I hope you'll all agree that Mark's work is not only so engaging, it's also so beautifully crafted. You are widely considered certainly one of the finest, if not the finest, handstone carver working today. So again, we are so honored to have your work on site and to have you spend time with us here. You and I maybe will talk a little bit more, but then given the time, maybe we should open it up to questions.
Absolutely.
I want to thank everyone for staying as long as you have, but I just want to say just a couple things before we turn it over to our guests. It feels as though that the work in some ways has gotten larger and larger in scale. Even though in some cases you work on smaller pieces, there's still this monumentality. Is that something you think about, or is it just essential to the type of materiality that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, one of the good things about getting old is,
We're the same
we're
age,
having
by the way.
limited time left. You want to make trivial things less and less.
Yeah.
Or you just want everything to count.
Yep.
And that's why even, the models matter a lot
Yeah.
to be carved in stone or whatever the scale is.
Yes.
And also, my father was a composer.
He
And I
was.
remember one thing he always says, whether it's a little jingle or a symphony, like, don't make anything trivial. And
No.
that's
no.
the new kind of...
Yeah, but by the way, your father
Echo.
was a significant composer, and you're a significant artist, so I can see there's a lot going on in the family. But this is fantastic. Maybe we should open it up to the public
Yeah,
and
please.
see.
Anybody?
Julia Ray, do we have we do have an extra mic. Thank you, Julia Ray. And again, thank you, Julia Ray, for the entire assistance of the library. It's always such a pleasure to be here and to have such a wonderful audience.
Thank you. Thank
We've
you
got
so
time
much.
for a few. You and thank you. Any more? Oh, pleasure.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. Make sure you go to the Glass House. I know I'm going to be driving over there as soon as I can to come see this.